Welcome back to the program. Glad you're with us this morning. My name is Dr. Salk. This is Fresh Air in the Morning, right here on Island 92 and Z 105.1 FM. Please join me in welcoming back to the studio my very good friend, Emil Lee, host of St. Martin Insights, news that matters to you, with all the good stuff that happened yesterday. What happened yesterday? I say I don't watch your videos now until
Yes.
because I want to have
Well,
an
actually,
honest reaction.
you know what? I'm not going to go over what happened in press yesterday. I think first we need to kind of look at what's happening in government with the Ministry of VSA, that's the Ministry of Health, Labor, and Social Development, and the Prime Minister.
Mm-hmm.
So just because it's been going back and forth, and I think it's good to sort of put it in context for people.
Sure.
So you remember, it's with the whole nuclear arms buildup, they have this philosophy called MAD, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mutually assured destruction, right? So that's the theory behind.
Sounds like our government.
Exactly, right? So there's a couple letters that are circulating on the internet now, where the URSM, so that's the party of the prime minister,
Right.
has written a letter to the Minister of Health, Minister Brooke, saying that for a number of reasons, and they've outlined that here, that they no longer have confidence in him as a minister and actually no longer want him as a member of their party either, and
So
have
he, so
asked for his immediate resignation.
so Minister Brooke is a member of the URSM.
He is also a member of that same political party, correct?
Wow.
So so I just looked at highlights.
Did they tell us what those reasons are?
Yeah, so
What are the
highlights.
reasons?
So just to quickly, there's an issue that if you remember, there was I think he was a former member of Parliament, Romain Laville, and then he had issues. I think this was with the whole carnival coup and bringing down government, etc. So his wife is actually the chef de cabinet of the minister of VSA. And the accusation is that
So she is the chief of staff.
chief of staff in the minister's office.
Okay, and who is this again? This is
Romain Laville's
his
wife,
Got it.
right? I have her name here somewhere.
Okay.
So, they're building a new mental health facility. I think it's up somewhere close to where the White and Yellow Cross is. It
Mhm.
hasn't started yet. And they needed a consultant. And apparently, they hired the husband as the consultant for
So
just under 50,000 guilders.
so they hired the husband of the chief of staff
Right.
for just under the amount.
So
There, 50,000 guilders. If you go over 50,000 guilders, you need the council of ministers to approve the expenditure.
well, there's a bidding process.
Right.
Then you need to get 3 quotes, and
Right.
the process changes. Basically, you could say under 50,000, you can kind of just decide whatever you want to do, right? Once it goes over 50,000, the idea is that you need to go through a specific process. And his contract was for 6 weeks. So if you figure it out, it's, let's see, 8,085 guilders a week, or if you worked it into a monthly salary, the equivalent of 32,340 guilders a month, right? So pretty high. I don't know what work was done. So they're saying, look, you tailor made the position to suit your husband. Well, that to suit this person. So, for example, one of the things that they put in the requirements was
How long was how long?
6 weeks.
For 6 week project.
Mm-hmm.
So 50,000 guilders is about
Well,
28,000.
it's 48,510 was the contract.
Okay, 48,510
Right.
divided by 1.78 is $27,252.
Mm-hmm.
$253
For 6 weeks.
for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Divided by 6 is $4,500 a week.
Mm-hmm.
Divided by 40 hours, it's $113.56 an hour if you're working a full-time job.
So, um, I don't know what the scope of the work was. I don't know what was required. One of the things what they're saying is you put in the tender in the requirements was that you needed to have some experience or expertise in working with the NRPB. And so once you do that, your field of clients diminishes
Right.
substantially, right? It's like
But,
me.
by the way, if you were to annualize that salary in
Right.
dollars, it's a $236,000 a year salary,
Yeah. Okay.
um, which is a significant salary in St. Martin, to say the least.
Right.
Okay.
So now, it's like me coming up with a tender that says, look, I want a gentleman who was, lived in Milford, Connecticut, who's hosted radio shows. So you basically craft
Mm,
a job description so that you're the only person that fits for it. That's the accusation,
mhm.
right? So I don't know whether that's true or not. I will say though that if your chief of staff in your office has a relationship married to the person, you should recuse yourself
For the
from
decision.
that process. And I don't think that's what happened. And you have other staff members in the office. You could have just simply had somebody else sign the advice. It would have been, a prudent thing to do. Just a little bit of, at least,
A little bit of
optics would be
right,
better, right?
right.
So again, I don't know if it's true or not. There's also accusations that he meddled in the appointment of the adjunct director for the supervisory board of SZV. So if you remember Glenn Carty, he reached his retirement age.
Mm.
I've worked with Glenn for years. And what's frustrating is they knew he was going to retire from, years ago. So I don't know why you always wait till people leave to finalize the recruitment process.
Well,
In the
then
normal world,
you would know. I would know. Like, if I'm going to retire next year, I'm going to start looking for my successor. You know, 10 months, a year before.
you want the successor to overlap with
Right.
the outgoing person so that the outgoing person can help to show you where everything is and what issues they have and do a
Yeah.
transition period. So that's what the real world
So
does.
whatever. Who is the head of S&V now? Do we know?
um so I believe it is Elton Felici.
Mhm.
He was the I think he was working as an interim director for a while. He's comes from financial background, and he's been there for years. So it would be a promotion from within SZV. So again, I don't know if that's the right person for the position or not. They're just the accusation is you meddled. There was supposed to be somebody else who was going to go in and take the position, and you interfered and put somebody else there. And the accusation is that the the person has a relationship with one of the people in the ministry of VSA and whether there's um, any conflicts of interest there. I don't think so. I mean, that I've known Elton during my term when I was minister, and you know that relationship has always been somewhat separate. So, but this is politics, right?
Mm. Well, there was also another candidate, right, that had been selected,
Correct.
and that was somehow squelched, right,
Exactly.
by the minister. That in and of itself, if the selection committee has selected someone, and then the minister throws it out and selects someone else, that gives me reason for cause, because as an executive, right, and that's what our ministers technically are,
Mm-hmm.
as executive managers, you should be relying on the advice that you get from the team that you have, supporting your operation. And if the search committee has come up with a recommendation and you've chosen to throw it out, that kind of gives me reason for cause, or reason to ask at least why.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Mm.
And so the minister of VSA has written a reply to some of these, well, to all of this stuff. So this is the letter from.
Meanwhile, let me just, so I'm perfectly clear and upfront. I don't know the minister of VSA. I've never met him. We have invited him to be guest on the studio here on Island 92 a number of times, and he has never accepted our offers.
Okay,
All true, right?
true,
Okay,
true.
just so we're clear.
I know him. I've
Yeah,
met him in
yeah,
press conferences.
yeah.
But okay, so this was the letter from the board of URSM
Hmm.
to the Minister of VSI, right? So obviously, and then it obviously got leaked to the media. Now, the Minister of VSI has written a response back, which is also pretty hard, if maybe even harder. Number one, accuses the Prime Minister of leaking documents, not following government procedure. So the leaking of confidential information, in theory, is an illegal act.
It's a crime.
It's a crime because the board of URSM is not government, right? So government can share documents within government,
Right.
but the board is a political entity. It's outside of the government sphere. So leaking documents to the board, he's saying that's not ethical. And this is frustrating. He says that from the time he went into office, he was instructed to put two people from, I think, the party, I don't know if they were on the board, but two people from URSM party in his cabinet. And according to Minister Brooke, he's seen correspondences that the two were instructed to gather information to basically make sure that within 3 months they would have sufficient proof to remove him from office, right? So in other words, from the very beginning, the idea was that that they should gather enough information to have him removed. So that's a pretty heavy accusation, right?
Well, if you're going to make that accusation, you better be able to damn well prove it. That's all I can say.
Well, he says he's got the email messages from one of those cabinet members. I think that's what he says in his letter. And then, of course, he denies that there was conflicting roles. Like I said, I don't know whether the hiring of LaVille's company for the job for the project they had related to mental health, whether it was right or not. I do think that the chief of staff should have recused herself from the process. So, but he's denying that there's any wrongdoing there.
On what grounds?
On what?
How could he say that there's no wrongdoing? You're hiring.
Well, he's saying that
you're hiring your husband.
Yeah. Yes, that's why I said the optics are wrong.
You're hiring your husband for just about below the dollar amount, or the Gilder amount that requires you to go out to bid.
So the counter argument would be suppose the process happened outside of the minister's office, right? Like one department in the ministry put together terms of reference, and this was the best person for the job, and then sent it to the minister's office to sign off on it, would be completely different. So it doesn't mean that he wasn't the right person for the job. It just means that the process certainly leaves room for manipulation, right? And unfortunately, you see it very often that government tends to craft their terms of reference and their bidding documents in order to suit certain people, right?
Well, see, what seems to me, right, is when as a someone who's been an executive for so many years, right, before my time at Island 92, one of the key things that I always look at a senior level was avoiding risk, right? And if I'm going to take a risk, I'm going to put the risk up front. I'm going to tell people point blank, here's the risk, here's what we're going to do, here's the risk we're taking, and here's what I'm doing to mitigate the risk. And given this particular situation, it would have been smart for the minister or the chief of staff to say, listen, we have a role to fill. Publicly state we have a role to fill. We've looked. There's one candidate. It happens to be my husband. I'm stepping back I'm stepping an arm's length away to let other people make the decision that he is the right person for the job, and that if that body comes back and says that we've looked at all the candidates and this is the right person for the job, then okay. But I've done that up front. I've taken the bull by the horns, and I've taken the potential conflict or bad optics away because I've addressed it before the process began.
Exactly.
And that's just what you call management um, uh, maturity,
And,
leadership maturity.
and the sad thing is, who gets hurt in the process? So number one, government overall reputation wise gets hurt, right? So the public says, "Oh, here we go again, bunch of
Well,
jokers," right? So that
that's one thing, but ultimately, who gets hurt? The
the
taxpayers,
taxpayers, right?
people
So
like
that's
you
the
and me.
ultimate. So the government gets hurt because credibility gets hurt, right? So now you just have two parties mudslinging, and so what is it? It just means they all look dirty,
Right.
right? Okay. But then the other big sort of project that suffers is the mental health facility, right? St. Martin needs a new and larger mental health facility. Now the whole process is going to probably slow down. Everything is going to go back under a microscope now to say, okay, is everything good or not? So you're going to probably end up re-examining the whole process, which is just going to slow it down. And now everybody's going to be on their, you know, pins and needles to make sure that there's no problems and no issues down the road. No one's going to want to be fingered for something.
So I was going to say, management maturity, ethical maturity, and just always doing the right thing all the time and risk avoidance. But at the end of the day, it all comes down. I could sum all this up in one word or in 3 words: lack of leadership.
So let's go through it. So here's the part that is, I don't know, disappointing. In here now, so remember, now we're talking about the response of Minister Brooke to the URSM party.
Mm-hmm.
And now he starts saying, "You're accusing me of not having integrity." The prime minister, he's saying, has now issues with integrity. He's talking about Hensley Plantain. He was the former Secretary General
Mm-hmm.
for the Ministry of General Affairs. There was some issue with I think with Silveria, and they were going to fire him, and it was in court. And supposedly the prime minister interfered in that process and took Hensley Plantain into his cabinet. So he's saying, look, here's an example of your lack of integrity. Then, if you remember, we talked about the BIC legislation.
Mm-hmm.
So currently, under the laws, basically every physician coming to the island has to meet Dutch requirements, which are very complicated and not necessarily well suited for St. Martin. So I agree that St. Martin needs to come with its own legislation for how it brings in doctors to the island, right? So, and if you remember at the time we talked about it, that it was strange that the prime minister was taking over the development of legislation regarding licensing of healthcare professionals, right? It's not his ministry. Now,
he just happens to be a physician.
he happens to be a physician. But remember, he's a physician. He's indicated before becoming prime minister he wants to be able to come back to the hospital if he stops his position as prime minister or a role in government. And remember, his wife is also a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
So you have personal interests. So I would tread carefully in terms of how you're managing this. But Brooks' accusation is that the prime minister took a person, I don't know her name, Artie Barron, from within the ministry, from legal affairs, and put her in charge of the project without bidding. So, and then the question is, did you pull her in because you're doing a favor? Did you pull her in because you want her to write what you want in the legislation? Or just because you have more faith in this person and feel like it's going to get done correctly? But again, the accusation is you didn't follow proper procedures. So, and as I said, I think given the fact that he's a doctor and his wife's a doctor and has interests.
With all due respect, though, this, right, is very different than, in my mind, of my chief of staff hiring their husband to do a job. It's wildly different.
Although, if the person's a political supporter and now you're going to make sure that the person gets a contract,
it's wildly different. It's
okay.
it's not crystal clean, but it's also wildly different than me saying I'm going to hire my husband to do a job, right, with public money. It's
Mhm.
it's it's a wildly different thing. Let me do this. Let's take a quick commercial break. 8:37. More St. Martin Insights news that matters to you with my good buddy Emil Lee. Here's everything that's happening tonight. Welcome back to the program. Of course, St. Martin Insights news that matters to you right here on Fresh Air in the Morning with yours truly, Dr. Sock, and of course, our managing editor of Korea Broadcasting Network News, Emil Lee. Welcome back, sir. So, when I'm thinking about all of this that's going on,
Mm-hmm.
the thing we haven't talked about this when we were on the break. We weren't talking about
Right.
our topic just because
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to save everything so we
Mm-hmm.
can have
Mm-hmm.
honest reactions. It just comes back to me on certainly on the part of the chief of the cabinet of the minister of health,
Mm-hmm.
VSA, right? It just screams of conflict of interest, no matter how you slice it. There's no way around it.
I agree. And at a minimum, really bad judgment, right? Yes.
Yeah. Um,
And you need to trust your staff. And actually, the staff, whether the minister thought of it or not, the staff should have said, wait a minute, boss. I'm conflicted here. I can perhaps help, but in the end, the final decision should be made by somebody else. I don't want to be involved. I mean, just for,
yeah.
for to protect the minister, right? That's
How,
your
how
job.
about how about to protect the
The
taxpayers?
taxpayers,
Because
the
yeah,
process, yes.
because what it seems to me is that we when all of our government employees, our government officials, our government leaders, they're spending our money. They're spending the people's money, and you have an obligation to make sure that you spend the money that doesn't belong to you in the best interest of all of the people.
Right.
Um, when I look at the situation that you described, or that Minister Bruch describes with uh, there being a conflict with um, the uh, the the prime minister, you know what? I that doesn't.
Well,
I don't. It doesn't feel like the same kind of in your face.
but there's other things. So,
Yeah.
for
So
example,
what
he,
else?
he accuses the prime minister of interacting directly with um, employees of the Ministry of VSA. So, the prime minister is Warnema, or he's the substitute minister for VSA. So,
Hmm.
in government, every minister has a substitute minister, right?
Right.
So when the minister of VSA is off island, the prime minister would fill in for the responsibilities of the ministry of VSA, right? So
Mhm.
that's normal. And he and the in the letter,
What do they call that?
Warnema.
Okay.
So the Brooke is saying that the prime minister was giving instructions to employees in the Ministry of Health when he was not substitute minister. So he's overstepping his authorities, is the accusation. And also, apparently, according to them, making the employees feel very uncomfortable.
Well, now let's go back to that first one. Overstepping his bounds
Mm-hmm.
doesn't feel like an ethical conflict of issue in a conflict of interest issue. But okay, let's keep going.
But they're saying, for example, that there were physicians waiting for approval to be able to practice in St. Martin. There's a process how that happens, right? Remember, the BIC legislation hasn't
Right.
changed yet. The advice was negative, not to approve the physicians, and the prime minister came in and said, just approve them, basically, right? So, I mean,
That's not right if that
that
happens.
if it's correct, right? These are all accusations. Nothing's been proven, or nothing's
Well,
gone
so
to
what I
court.
wonder is, and you will know this from your old job.
Mm-hmm.
So who do you have? Who's in the Ministry of Health, of Public Health, that actually is a physician?
Ooh. Um, we used to have Earl Best. He was the
Doctor,
inspector, yeah, but he's at the
he's
AUC now. I
he
think
retired,
he retired. I'm not sure that
right?
of the qual, but some are public health educated, for example,
Hmm.
but not necessarily like a practicing physician.
Understood. Okay,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it would seem to me that, um, and this is not a defense,
Most are not.
right?
Yes.
But it would seem to me to have the insights of a doctor, a medical doctor, um, as part of the process, would be a value added
But to be honest, there are
perspective.
structures
Mhm.
for the medical professionals to give their opinions.
Mhm.
Um, and I'll say, for example, when I was minister, I thought along the same lines as you, and actually, I had a doctor in cabinet,
Mhm.
and turned out that there was an issue that the person was actually trying to sort of set themselves up for after their role in cabinet that they would have a position. So you have to also be careful conflicts of interest.
This is called you need to work with people that have integrity.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
No matter what they do, right? And
But in the end, remember, doctors also have business interests.
sure, sure,
And so, for example, I remember when I was there was a whole issue that doctors who have private practices were trying to say, look, there's a value in my practice, and they were trying to sort of protect that and say, we don't want new doctors. So if new doctors come in, you have to buy my practice, right? So imagine if you cap no new practices, right?
yeah, that's silly.
Then you have to buy an existing
That's
practice, which
silly.
makes the value higher.
That's
So
silly.
I'm just saying that you got to be careful as well.
Integrity.
Yeah, but those are
Yeah,
things
you know,
you would run into.
mm,
So so yeah, indeed, accusations that the prime minister is overstepping, and as I mentioned always from before, the prime minister, while I understand it, working on the big legislation is a question mark. Why is that? So yeah, and then he goes through and responds to a bunch of the other things. And this is where he points out that this is the Brook saying that he's seen WhatsApp messages in September by you in your capacity as president of the board to two members of my cabinet placed by the board in which such individuals were explicitly instructed to gather information against me for the purpose of removing me from office. I mean, those are pretty heavy accusations.
better
The
be able to prove it.
Yeah, the president of the board is Brenda Brooks, right?
Hmm.
He goes on to say, I also want to point out to you that several staff members of Brooks and Associates hold board positions in key government companies. So like, this is his way of saying, look, you're favoring party people, putting them in positions where they get paid to be board members. And so all in all, unfortunately, what happens is they both look bad and makes government look bad and frustrates taxpayers, frustrates citizens. So I looked a little bit at the makeup in Parliament. So remember that they've asked for his resignation. It doesn't look like Brooke is going to resign, right?
Right.
So it means it'll come down to a vote in Parliament, right?
Mhm.
Parliament's 15 members of members of Parliament. The coalition currently has 9, so that's made up of the Democratic Party, the URSM, PFP, and the SAM Party.
Right.
So, in order to have a motion of no confidence go through, they need at least 8 votes to support that motion.
And they have 9. They have 9 in the
Well,
coalition.
9 in the coalition. So you have 6 in opposition. Opposition always just wants chaos, right?
Right.
So the 6 will vote to get rid of anyone in government. Anything
Right.
that makes government look bad, I think they'll just support, right?
Right.
So that means the opposition needs 2 more to vote. And I see URSM has 3. So that's Shamira Roseberg, Veronica Janssen-Webster, and Chris Weaver.
Hmm.
So if
But
those 3 support,
but this is also really interesting because the URSM is part of the coalition. They're asking to have one of their own members go.
but in their own letter, it's
Yeah.
coming from within, right? This
Right.
is them,
Yeah.
taking from their own party. So you would expect that the URSM parliament members will support the position of the party.
Right.
So I think that's why Brooke called in sick yesterday. I
Uh,
think that's why he didn't go to parliament, right? He can see the writing on the wall.
right.
So, but interestingly, also yesterday they had a motion of no confidence against Patrice Gums, right? Lyndon Lewis put forth a motion to have him dismissed, no confidence. So that would be more interesting, to see if people are going to cross over to support that measure or not. So this is where you're going to start to see sort of the real politics of what's going on. So unfortunately, what this means is government ministers in particular are going to be spending time and energy on politics instead of what's
Our business.
important to the
Our
country.
our
Correct.
business.
Correct.
Do
And
do your job. Be leaders.
and just like any relationship, when things get to the point where you have documents that are stating positions officially and then sort of aired in public, it it shows that there's a, you know, dysfunctional communication, that things are not working. So personally, you know, you would expect opposition now, seeing the weakness, is going to try and look for ways to drive wedges in, perhaps throw down government, perhaps call for elections. So, you know, it's disappointing. It means energy that should be spent on the country is going to be spent on politics. And indeed, I'm already seeing people trying to work on their lists, gearing up for an election. So
God.
they're already preparing, and you know, those discussions are being had.
Ugh. Here we go.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. But all in all, it doesn't bode well for the stability and effectiveness of government. So real quickly, let's just touch on some of the things in press. Talked about yesterday how
We have 3 minutes.
Yeah, fuel prices going up. GB has a history of when fuel prices go up, their fuel clause is not sort of a one-for-one pass-through. The higher fuel prices are, actually GB's profitability goes up. And if you remember, there were 2 reports floating around showing that even in the past, they already made money off of the fuel clause. So I asked the Minister of TIOT, because she has BTP, and they're talking about regulating the fuel clause and the rates for electricity and water. And she said that legislation's not in place yet, but they're in discussions with GB. But that's something that government, again, needs to tackle. She did mention that Southwest Airlines has 2 flights, one from Orlando and the other one from Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
So that's good, you know, for the shoulder and summer season here. So hopefully we can tap into those markets.
Yeah, and I think JetBlue has also expanded their Fort Lauderdale coverage as well. Which
you mean the frequency?
Yeah, frequency.
Okay, good.
So that's nice too.
Vehicle controls are starting. I asked the Minister of Justice to clarify. She said she's put it, I know for sure she put it on Facebook, about what you need to have for your vehicles. Expect police to stop you. They're looking for insurance. They're looking that you've paid your road tax, that your inspection's up to date. You're supposed to have a license plate front and back for your car. Your window tinting is supposed to comply with regulations. Motorcycles, you need a license, a helmet, etc. So just expect controls and try and have your documents in order.
Yeah, it's all normal stuff. If you have your documents in order, it's really not a big deal.
It's just a pain. Like last night I was going over the hill and they were just pulling over cars. So just have your stuff ready so you can get in and out fast. Yeah.
Did they recognize you or no? Did you know the officers?
No. They didn't stop me. Yeah. They didn't stop me.
That's what happens a lot. Because I know the police. They see me and because they know I've got my stuff.
Yeah. I asked the Minister of TIOT, because consumer protection is one of the things that falls under her ministry. And one of the things I asked her, and she said they will work on it, but not currently, is the tax department. You know, the tax department can only go back 5 years when they're looking at your finances, right? And after that, it becomes what they call time barred, unless they send you an assessment. And then it sort of extends that period because now there's an active
so this is why they send out bogus assessments all the time.
And that's what I asked her. I said, you know, what you see very often is on the last month of that 5-year period, they'll send you an assessment.
Everybody gets one.
Yeah, that's just sort of a fictitious assessment, but it costs time and money to respond and to deal with all of those, right? And so she said, indeed, it's something that she will look at when the consumer legislation comes up. So, but it's annoying, and it's clear. It's just a round number. It's 100,000, 200,000. So there's no basis for it. It's just a placeholder.
Which way is the wind blowing?
Yeah, and that's unfair.
Emil, always a pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Always fun to be here.
And look forward to doing this again next week.
Yep.
Of course, Simart Insights, news that matters to you. And we'll be right back in just a minute with the marine and tropical weather update, as always brought to you by K Beach Club and Restaurant. K like character. And then the Bob Marley Jimmy Buffett moment is brought to you by Toppers. It's 9 a.m. right here in the Northeast Caribbean.